Plattsburgh, Virginia, Tucson, Arizona, Aurora, Colorado, and most recently, Las Vegas and Parkland. As of February 26, 2018, we have had 51 people killed in mass shootings and 110 injured in those mass shootings. In the last 5 years, we've had 1,367 mass shootings. Hundreds of innocent children have been killed and injured in these mass shootings at the hands of an assault weapon. So I thank my colleagues for co-sponsoring along with me, and I'll them and any comments that they may want to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samples. What we'll do is, I know we have another co-sponsor that's on the committee of the Public Safety Chair or Committee. Do you want to say anything, Ms. Sims? Please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think, as we all know in this chambers, we talked for years, probably even before I got here, about our issues around gun violence, even in our own city. We started working on legislation to ban bump stocks and crank triggers even prior to this last event in Florida. I mean, assault rifles, bump stocks allows the rifle to be adapted and enable it to dispense somewhere between 400 and 800 rounds per minute. So what are we really talking about here? We're talking about weapons and tools of mass destructions, tools and weapons that have really no place in a civilized society. For certain, we shouldn't find them in our schoolhouse. We certainly shouldn't find them in our houses of worship. We shouldn't find them in our city, and definitely not in our neighborhoods. It's just time out. Something needs to be done. It just seems like the time is now. And even when I hear myself say now, it doesn't seem like it's quick enough. I believe this matter to be urgent. I thank my colleague for bringing it forth, and I appeal to my colleagues of this committee and council as a whole to join us in support of this resolution. Timely resolution, I might add. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. Mr. Swirsky?
Yes, it's clear that assault weapons were designed for the military. They're not really appropriate for citizen use. There has been a horrible vacuum of leadership at the state and federal level, which has done nothing in the face of some very evil acts done all around the country. I think all of us here at City Council strongly regret that cities have their hands tied to do something more meaningful, to do something that is nonpartisan. We support the citizens who are demanding action, and we'd like to see all fair-minded, peace-loving people support a ban on these assault weapons.
Thank you, Mr. Swirsky. Any other sponsors that want to speak? No? Okay. You know, I just think the timing of this resolution is wrong in regards to we're in a campaign season right now. There's an election coming up in May. I look at this resolution, I see, you know, numerous states that has failed to gun violence. You know, I do oppose. I do think something needs to be done in regards to these assault rifles and weapons, but I just see that this resolution should have been brought in sooner. Tucson, Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Las Vegas, Nevada. I just really believe that this resolution is in regards to someone getting their name out there for an upcoming election, and I just think it's wrong to use this council chambers as that platform. So I'm against this piece of resolution. All due respect, I'm chairperson, and I will restore order. So with that, that's all I have to say for now. Did you have a comment or a question, Mr. Hoke? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the resolution in front of us and going to section number 2 as to what is being asked, that Akron urges the Ohio General Assembly to enact legislation prohibiting the sale of all weapon augmentations that increase a weapon's rate of fire. I don't know if anybody has researched it or not, or checked into anything, but as right now, House Bill 395 is in the Ohio House, and one of the co-sponsors of this House bill is Tavia Galensky, who is a Ohio representative and in our area. As a matter of fact, she's my representative. So I think that, asking the Ohio General Assembly to enact legislation is kind of moot because they're already doing that. They are addressing this, and they do have legislation going through committee that they're trying to get through into a vote. And I feel that Section 2 is, like I said, relatively moot. Also, going into and looking at section number 1, asking that the Assembly enact a law mirroring the provisions of the assault weapons ban of 2013. Going back and looking through some of the things that have been discussed about weapons and in the United States Legislation Assembly is different comments from different people. One of them was in 2013 for this legislation, Senator Ted Cruz commented and said, "My biggest concern is it doesn't address the problem. It doesn't target violent criminals. Instead, it targets law-abiding citizens," and that's why, in essence, one of the reasons that was turned down in the United States Senate in 2013. I don't think it's something that's going to probably go too far in 2018 because it's still there. If we're going to mirror it or ask them to mirror the provisions in that, I don't think it's going to go there. Another comment that was made was we don't need new and more laws. We need to enforce what is there. And that's true in a lot of cases. And we've done that ourselves in City Council whenever we had the panhandling that came before us, and we were looking for different ways and different ideas and passing a different law to find a way to deal with panhandling. I think what we did is we came down to the fact that we do have laws on the books, and we decided not to change anything, and we decided that maybe we should look at the laws that we do have and utilize those laws. Representative Steve Scalise, he's a Republican from Louisiana that was gunned down during the baseball team practice last year and came back. His comment about the recent shootings in Florida and everywhere else is there's no magic bill that's going to stop the next thing from happening when so many laws are already on the books that weren't being enforced. And it's true. There again, we have to look at the laws that we have to enforce them. If we can pass any law and ask for any law that we possibly want to get, but if we don't enforce it and we don't do something with it, then it doesn't matter. It's not going to go anywhere, and it's not going to be anything. So there's a number of different articles that are out. There was another article on foxnews.com about America has two gun cultures and don't blame law-abiding gun owners for murders. And basically, you know, we're in a continuous fight about gun laws and rights and gun rights and you know, who's allowed to have them and who's not allowed to have them. There's about 100 million law-abiding gun owners, and somehow we're looking at making laws and taking privileges and rights away from these owners. And what we do have to do is ally to fight and stop the criminals who are using the guns, not the law-abiding citizens. One of the last items in that article is we'll never stop all murderers, whether they are committed by terrorists, bank robbers, or mentally ill, but it would help if we could channel our attention and resources toward criminals and the mentally ill who are a danger to themselves and others, not the good citizens who live across this great nation. I also had a few items that at the end of the day, what are we asking about? What are we asking for? Is this anything that will change or bring about change? Like Mr. Kamer, I think that this is being brought in through a political campaign endeavor. It's a proposal that of emotion and feelings without fact, and I cannot support this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hoke. I'll go to Mr. Fusco. I know he had his hand up, and then I'll come back over here to try to get anyone that hasn't spoke yet. So, Mr. Fusco.
Thank you. Having been one who's been heavily involved in this over the last several years from a number of different perspectives. And I know council has been involved, as Ms. Sims had just mentioned. This has been talked about by council for a long time. And it a number of years ago for me was whenever was involved with Mayor Bloomberg's asking, he set up a mayor's kind of association that was just asking for reasonable legislation, reasonableness. And I think that's what we need to look at. This council here, and I appreciate bringing this in. I rise in favor in that we have been on the record. You know, sometimes people say, well, resolutions don't mean a whole lot. Well, I think they do. It's our voice. And so, you know, in 2016, this council passed a resolution that asked for legislation that would prohibit suspected terrorists from purchasing firearms, and that would require criminal and mental health backgrounds. I think that's reasonable to ask for. In 2016, we had 3 resolutions that we passed. And they all seem to fall on deaf ears, it seems. One of those that we passed in 2016 was House Bill 48 in reference to the college campuses, and even going as far as to say it's okay to bring a gun into daycare centers. Then we also had passed, in support of President Obama's executive to reduce gun violence, ask for background checks, and trying to close that gun show loophole that we all hear about. Whereas, you know, anyone can go to a show, purchase whatever they wish. Plus, the other piece of that is on the internet. You can acquire. And also in 2013, we had passed a resolution again that was an appeal to both the U.S. Congress and the Ohio General Assembly, asking just simply for reasonable gun control. And I think that's what we have to look at, and we've been asking this for quite some time, and just nothing seems to get done. I think that's our frustration. Reasonableness. I don't think that anyone here, at least myself, and I obviously can't speak for everyone here, but I don't think we're wanting to go out and those individuals who utilize guns for hunting, and so on and so forth, we don't want to take those away. That's not it. I think what we want to do is prevent the access from the bad actors out there. And it seems as though this is such an extreme debate within our community, within Ohio, within the United States of America, such an extreme debate, but how many more kids, how many more families have got to lose loved ones? And so I rise in favor of this. I certainly respect the Second Amendment, but we have to look for reasonableness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fusco. I saw Mr. Neal, your hand was up earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleague, and I want to thank the main sponsor of this bill for bringing it in. I am concerned, though, with my colleagues who said this is for political reasons.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, it's sad, as Mr. Fusco has said, and others have said, we have lost multiple lives because people have played politics with this issue, because they can't provide the leadership that Mr. Swirsky mentioned because they'd rather take the campaign contributions. But you mentioned that this was brought in for political reasons. Two of the folks that have sponsored this in this chamber for this whole, all of 2016 stood up and tried to have gun buyback program here in our city, and mentioned how this is not just an inner city problem. Now, you mentioned trying to keep these guns from criminals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but most of these people that have committed these mass shootings didn't have a criminal background. They didn't fit the terrorist description. So what we're talking about, as my colleague Mr. Fusco mentioned, was not making assault weapons, weapons that were designed for no other reason but to make it easier to kill people. No one goes hunting deer with an assault rifle. These weapons have one purpose and one purpose only, and that's to kill someone. And if we can't put the politics aside, like I said, many of the folks that are on this bill have stood in this chamber over the course of the year and talked about the problems of guns, have tried to have our city have a gun buyback program. So I hope that at least in these chambers, we can agree with folks from across the country, I think Mr. Swirsky mentioned, who are supporting the voice of those who are saying, you know what, enough is enough. This issue cannot be politicized. So hopefully here we can stand and do the right thing. You know, again, a comment was made that this was done for political reasons. No, check the record. Long before, all throughout 2016 and before that, this council collectively and the Councilwoman Samples, who's been pointed out in this matter, has stood in these chambers and asked us to do something about guns in our immediate community. So I just want to say I support this. I'm hoping that we as a country can move. It seems like when you follow this country's history, that most social change doesn't happen until our young people. You look through the civil rights movement. It's beautiful to see these young people leading, but at least those of us in these chambers were elected to lead, and I'm hoping that we can do that by supporting this legislation. And as Mr. Fusco said, sending a message, and others have said, sending a message that, you know, we're going to do what we can by saying, lending our voice to this matter and saying that we agree with others, saying that the banning of assault rifles, assault weapons is needed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. And like I said, we all have opinions, and I know your comments were directed towards me, but, and I have my opinions today. And I'm a big advocate as public safety chairperson to put together meetings on gun violence and gun control here in our own city of Akron. I have one of my colleagues, Mrs. Sims, that's very adamant and involved with those gun discussions and taken upon herself to move forward with bringing people down here to continue those discussions. But what I see today and what I've been hearing on talk radio and throughout the community, just, I'm not going to stand for it anymore down here, and I'm going to start raising my voice and not having this as a political platform for certain individuals. So that's how I feel. So with that, I want to try to get to people that hasn't spoke yet. Mrs. Omobian, I know you came in late. You're more than welcome to speak.
Thank you so much for acknowledging me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I stand in strong support of this legislation and anything that will ban assault weapons. I don't think they're needed. I follow these young people. I've been looking, and I think they're going to be the change agents that we need, because the adults, obviously, we have too much baggage, and we are not able to follow through and do what's needed to be done. These weapons are designed to kill multiple, massive numbers of people. That's all they're designed for, and they are not needed in this country. And I stand in very strong support, and I thank those of you who put your name on this. I'd like to have my name added if it's okay, because I think they are wrong, and I think, again, the children that are speaking out, can you imagine the trauma that they are going through? Not only went through when this was going on, but having to go back into that school building. And we've had multiple of these all over this United States, and we need to ban these things. And whatever it takes, we need to be a leader in this city to put our voices on this, to say enough is enough. And we shouldn't have it in Akron, Ohio, or in the state of Ohio, or anywhere in this country. These guns are made to kill multiple people, and we don't need this. They are not hunting rifles or anything. They are to kill massive numbers of folks. And please, I strongly support it.
Thank you, Mrs. Moby. And like I said, I do agree with you, but the timing, Las Vegas, Nevada, that was a horrible incident that I witnessed on TV and I paid close attention to. And I can name off these other cities, or Orlando, Florida. I didn't see any resolutions then. So moving forward,
So
Mr. Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too rise in support of this resolution. I want to thank my co-sponsor for having the courage to bring this resolution along. And hopefully, this is the instrument that'll be the change down in Columbus. And it does make a difference from my experience down in Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milkovich. All right, now we'll go back to Mrs. Sims. I know you've been patient.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would venture to say that most of the legislation that was recited here by my colleague was brought forth by myself and others that sit here today. If the record would be clearly divulged, the law department would tell you that we've been working on legislation to ban things like bumper stocks and crank triggers for quite some time, long before even what happened in Vegas. So we're not new kids on the block. This is our commitment, not only just because bodies of young people lay waste across this country in schoolhouses, but they lay waste on the streets of Akron and cities like Akron. So, like my colleague said, it's having the political courage to stand and do what's right. It is apparent that there is a vacuum in leadership in Washington and certainly in our state of Columbus. And so I think it's very important for us as a community of folks who are dealing with gun violence in our own city to stand and be on the right side of history. I guess I am taken aback personally that there would be some suggestion of collusion, that I would partake in some type of political wrangling because I want to advance somebody else's career. That is a personal insult to me. This is about our children, and this is about our children knowing that as representatives of this city, that we are standing with them, that we hear them and we see them. So I again stand in total support of this resolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Sims. Mr. Swirsky, and then I'm going to probably ask for a vote. Microphone, please.
I listened to some of the criticisms that have come forward, and nothing that you said can convince me that an assault weapon should be available to citizens. And I do think it is the responsibility of the city government of Akron to join with the thousands and thousands of people who have started advocating for some form of gun control. No resolution or even a state bill is going to completely solve the problem. We know that. We know that every day when we pass other bills and other ordinances and do other projects. It's not going to alleviate poverty. It's not going to, but it will take a step forward. And I would like to see our government here that's elected by the people stand with the people who support the banning of weapons that do not belong in the hand. There's no appropriate use by a citizen for these assault weapons. I strongly support it.
Thank you, Mr. Swirsky. All right, we have a motion for suspension of the rules. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Me? Nay?
Roll call, Kamer,
Nay.
Keith,
Nay.
Swirsky,
Yes.
Sims. Yes. Hope.
No.
Measure failed, the resolution fails 3-2.
Thank you. On to our next piece. We do have one more piece, and obviously our president, Madam President, is, can I get order, please? Madam President Somerville is bringing this in, expressing the heartfelt sympathy of the city of Akron to the families and friends of the victims of the shooting of Majority, if I pronounce that right, if I did not apologize, Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, extending wishes of healing for the Stoneman Douglas community in this time of tragedy and declaring an emergency. And please, Madam President, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Should be. Go ahead, you switch. I'm sorry.
Okay, much better. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the resolution is self-explanatory, expressing our heartfelt sympathy for the senseless tragedy. I think the piece, it just kind of brings us back to, we wouldn't be having to have this resolution if we had something on the books, banning these assault rifles. So we're talking about 17 people. We're talking about a football coach, an athletic director, and young students who had, their whole lives in front of them, that being taken away. But I think out of this, what's going to come is that these students, they aren't grieving silently. And I want to commend them just for their bravery of standing up and lending their voices to this gun violence debate that we're having right now. And they're having it on a national level because students, even here in Akron, they're concerned about safety. They're concerned about someone coming in and interrupting their moment of just wanting to advance themselves and educate themselves to possible shooting. So this is so important. And so I just hope that my colleagues will all support this resolution.
Thank you, Madam President. I see that you have all the names here, and then obviously a little bit of information in regards to a little background of something they like to do or they were part of. So I like that in that resolution. Any questions or comments from committee members? Mrs. Sims, please.
I'd like my name added. Thank you so much, Madam President. I would find it quite ironic that my colleagues would join in support of this resolution based on the previous vote. That was some of the concern of the young people, that there's a lot of lip service paid to doing something, but not too much action. So it's almost contradictory to support a piece like this, but not support the very vehicle to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So again, thank you, Madam President, for your courage and for acknowledging this invaluable loss of life and the irreplaceable replacement of tranquility and peace these young folks will feel for the rest of their lives. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sims. Mr. Hope, please.
I just wanted to say, Mrs. Sims, I'm sorry you feel that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Any other committee members? Mrs. Keith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am in favor of this resolution, and not that we should be speaking about other resolutions. I was just not in favor of suspension of the rules with the other resolution. It had nothing to do with the resolution in itself. It was on the motion of suspension of the rules. So I think there is a difference there. So I am in support of this resolution, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Keith. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Madam President, and something that we're always sensitive of, and I know we've said this before, and it makes me think of the shooting that took place down in Florida, and I think one of our own city members had a daughter that was there at the club, I think it was, is we acknowledge these because they're mass, but it's not to say that we don't grieve and feel the loss of life that happens, unfortunately, every day. And I can't help but think of the young 4-year-old that lost her life senselessly. But it's because of this country's, the availability of guns and the way we use them. Now, that wasn't an assault rifle. But I just think, as has been mentioned, whenever we have an opportunity to lend our voice to bring about change, to show compassion, or to pass legislation that in some kind of way will take us one step further to being a more civilized society, we need to do that. And so I just want to say thank you for this, but I also want to say, although we may not mention it every time, that I know those of us in council, because it impacts us, because we serve in these wards and our love and concern for this city, we value every life that is lost. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Any other questions or comments? With that, do I have a motion for something? Okay, thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
It just sits there. As far as I know. You know, unless somebody makes a motion to withdraw it.